Excellent work, Nancy. CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reid is back with me here at the regal black felt news desk in the Washington Bureau. And joining us also, again, not for the first time, I've seen him before, CBS News political contributor and Washington Post reporter Ed O'Keefe. I've seen you before.
Yes, you have, yeah.
And staying with us up there on the third floor, kind of lonely, but we're going to keep him company.
It's not very
CBS
regal
News political
up here,
director
Major.
Steve Shigaris. Paula, for those of us who've been watching the whole show, and we love you for that, I asked Jeff Pegues about a chilling effect within the FBI. You've been actually getting texts and having some actual reporting interactions with people in the FBI. Tell us what you're hearing.
There's no chilling effect. I mean, what this kind of...
No chill.
No chill. They have no chill. And that's a good thing here, because I think the FBI feels invigorated. There's sort of a renewed sense of purpose, because many people feel that this was unjustified.
The firing of Comey.
Yes. It feels like an attack on a member of their own family. And the FBI doesn't really tend to bend to political whims, or people don't see themselves as doing that. I mean, remember, Comey got himself sort of in this mess because he was trying to protect the integrity of the FBI. He didn't want anything leaking about the Hillary Clinton investigation. He wanted to come out and explain their reasoning and tell the American people and ultimately protect their reputation. Same with when he sent those letters to Congress. He was doing so because he didn't want any of that information to leak and be sort of a blot on the reputation of the FBI, that somehow they were withholding information. So going forward, I think you're going to see the investigators on this case double down and be as aggressive as they possibly can. There's no chill that I'm seeing.
And you also have some information an evaluation from an important voice about this letter that came from the Deputy Attorney General, Ron Rosenstein, really the only fact-based case laid out by the administration as to the justification for Comey's firing. Essentially, you had the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, endorse it, and Donald Trump, the President of the United States, refer to it, but there's only really one three-page document.
Exactly.
And you have some assessment of that from an important voice.
Exactly. Some of our producers here, they reached out to all of the former DOJ officials, Department of Justice officials from both from all parties and administrations who were quoted in Rosenstein's letter. He quoted a bunch of people who criticized Comey along the way. He, of course, left out people who praised him. And one of those people was the former Deputy Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, President George H.W. Bush. And they reached out to him, and he says that it seems that basing this entirely on Comey's mishandling of the Clinton investigation is a sham. So even though his words were used to support this decision, he's calling it a sham.
Ed, I don't want to lead the witness here. You've been doing work all day. What do you have to tell us?
Look, a few things. As Nancy said earlier, this is shocked Capitol Hill. Only the Senate's in town. The House is scattered across the country. An
institution that's difficult to shock, the United States Senate.
It is, although, and you heard today something that we've already heard over the course of the last 115 days or so, which is, I didn't think anything could surprise me, but here I am surprised yet again. And I saw that repeatedly in statements from Democrats especially. It's important to remember, while Democrats believe on principle that a special prosecutor is needed in this case now that this has happened, and have been saying so essentially since the start of the Trump administration, it has quickly become a rallying cry politically for Democrats. I was in Iowa on Sunday night in Des Moines at a party fundraiser where Senator Amy Klobuchar spoke. She's making some early moves regarding the 2020 campaign. And the MC reminded...
Never too early.
Never too early. And the MC reminded the crowd that she was one of the first Democratic lawmakers, and she's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, to call for an independent prosecutor. People leapt to their feet and gave her a standing ovation, which signaled to me how deep-rooted this belief is among partisan Democrats, that this has to happen at this point. She mentioned it again later in the speech, got another big round of applause. That signals that, you know, this is something they not only believe legally, but politically they understand that Democrats, and probably a lot of voters across the country at this point, want a above-politics figurehead of some variety to be leading a probe.
But this decision currently lies with the Deputy Attorney General,
right,
Rod Rosenstein, and he is adamantly opposed to independent prosecutors, to taking any matter like this away from experienced federal investigators and federal prosecutors. So it's going to be very difficult to convince him that the Department of Justice is incapable of doing this objectively. Perhaps he will also say that they have removed the only person who is not able to do this objectively, FBI Director Comey, and may argue all the more reason. Let us take it from here.
Steve, two questions. To Ed's point about what he observed in Iowa, do you predict this will have a galvanizing effect, if there even needed to be one, on this sort of resist component of congressional Democrats and their relationship to the entire Trump agenda? Question one. Question two, would you want to be the person nominated by President Trump as the new FBI director and to walk into what will clearly be a cauldron at best of suspicion and possibly outright hostility?
Yeah, to answer your second question first, I don't know who would want that heat. I mean, like you said, it's going to be a cauldron is probably an understatement about what that's going to be for that
blast
person.
Furnace, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be nonstop. And you know, we're already in a situation where this town and politics in general is hyper-polarized. So now you're throwing somebody into the fire, so to speak, who, you know, by no fault of their own, is going to have to answer questions about what the president did here. And, you know, it's interesting. Our colleague Mark Knoller sent around a transcript of when President Clinton fired the FBI director in 1993, the last time this had happened. And the president got out there and had a news conference to explain exactly what he was doing, why he was doing it, and that the next day he was going to name a replacement. And this was surrounding a guy who was having his own controversies and was not investigating the sitting president or his former campaign. I think the bar is higher for President Trump, and whoever now he is going to nominate to be FBI director is going to have to answer these questions for something that really is sort of out of their control. It's a problem that has been created by the person who's going to nominate him. I don't know who would want to deal with that heat.
And how about the resist idea, concept, strategy from Democrats?
I think it just adds, it's another on the laundry list of things that Democrats are using to fuel this resistance to President Trump. And, you know, I think you're going to see this, because I don't think the Russian controversy is going to go away anytime soon, at least before the midterms. I'm not sure about 2020, but there's no question that cloud's going to linger. There's no question healthcare is going to be an issue. And you just pile all these things on, and it gets Democrats fired up. And look, if you're dealing with a president whose approval ratings are in the sub 50% range and the 40% range, and you're walking into a midterm year with a laundry list of hyper-polarized issues that have energized the opposition, you got to watch out if you're a Republican, because these folks are going to be fired up over the next year and a half to boot them out of the majority.
Lots of reaction to the story today coming from Capitol Hill. We just have some recent reaction from Ben Sasse, Republican senator from Nebraska. During the campaign, not a big fan of President Trump or candidate Trump. Let's state that right up the top. But it's interesting what he says in his statement, and Ed, I want to get your reaction to it. I'll read it to you directly. The timing of this firing is very troubling. I'm quoting directly. Jim Comey is an honorable public servant, and in the midst of a crisis of public trust that goes well beyond who you voted for in the presidential election, the loss of an honorable public servant is a loss for the nation. As the chairman of the Judiciary Committee's Oversight Subcommittee, I have reached out to the Deputy Attorney General for clarity on his rationale for recommending this action.
He's not the only one. Richard Burr, who's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said almost the same thing, troubled by the timing and reasoning of Director Comey's termination. What's notable about what the president did tonight is it has now started to put distance between him and congressional Republicans, more so than ever before when it comes to the Russia investigation. Guys like Burr and others who have spoken out tonight in the past have said, look, you know, the Senate Intelligence Committee is doing their thing, the House Intelligence Committee is doing their investigation, let it be. There doesn't appear to be any wrongdoing tied directly to the president. Let's just let this play out. But tonight you're seeing statements like that. You're seeing Richard Burr, who was pulled aside by his own GOP colleagues on the Senate floor a few weeks ago and told, step it up, or we will join these calls for an independent prosecutor, now saying tonight he's troubled by what the president did. That, plus John McCain being really the only Republican at this point supporting the idea of an independent prosecutor. I suspect if the president goes another day without really clarifying why he did this and explain to the American people, you know, his decision to do it publicly, you could see these calls and this criticism intensify.
Will this have an effect on the rest of the Trump agenda?
It has an effect on everything at this point.
In what sense?
Well, let's
slow it down.
Let's start with personnel. The president just sent judicial nominees up to the Hill. There's hundreds of them to be filled at the district and appeals court levels. Democrats can't stop it necessarily, but they can raise objections and
slow it down.
And slow it down. That could muck up the rest of the Senate calendar through the year if Democrats insist that the full 30 hours have to be given on the Senate floor for each of these nominees. Same thing goes for when he starts to send up nominees for U.S. attorneys across the country. Remember, he fired the 92 U.S. attorneys all across the country. They're supposed to consult senators on who exactly should be the next U.S. attorney for these districts. If Democrats refuse to talk to the White House about this, it could cause problems there. And then, yes, when it comes to health care, which is already unpopular and causing great consternation for the party, the inability to get started on tax reform, which Republicans want to do more than anything, it'll have a big effect. Again, if the president doesn't come out in the next 24 hours or so, he'll really start to explain what he did here. Early on indications from the White House is that the staff was caught off guard. The communications staff. They weren't aware of this. And they're now fighting here to explain and clarify what the president did. And you're going to have a heck of a time tomorrow at the briefing trying to get information out of it.
I always do. Was the Justice Department surprised? Was it caught off guard? It
did appear when I was able to get people on the phone that people didn't know a lot. Right now, though, you've got to remember, Main Justice, there's not that many people there. In addition to firing all the U.S. attorneys who serve in offices across the country, the actual people who run the head of the Department of Justice, most of them have not been nominated. There were a few people who were in acting positions, several key officials, career officials. They're leaving. I mean, there's not a lot of warm bodies in Main Justice outside the offices of the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. So it does appear this is a closely held secret, but there's not a lot of people to share your secrets with at Main Justice right now.
Steve, thoughts?
Well, one thought I was just thinking about is how we haven't heard anything from former President Obama or Hillary Clinton in reaction to all this. And I was just thinking, what's the point? They don't need to. This has already turned out to be hugely controversial for the President Trump. And why stand in the way of that? Why create your own news? And I think them being silent is pretty interesting.
Well, former President Obama's staff made it very clear early on tonight there'll be no reaction. They were going to let the story play out exactly as it was playing out, and they were not going to get involved one way or the other. Hillary Clinton, those around Hillary Clinton may weigh in on this, and in fact they may have, and I may be unaware of it because I can't know everything here at the anchor desk, surprising as that may seem.
Come on, Major. You know everything.
For the Senate itself and the conversations in the cloakroom, I mean, it'll be interesting at the briefing tomorrow for sure, but I've got to imagine cloakroom conversations are going to be interesting as well. Like, what comes next? And when someone like Richard Blumenthal throws out constitutional crisis, some may say, oh, he's just exaggerating, but that's a term that has real meaning and real weight.
Yeah.
Is that what we're going to have a conversation about, at least in the cloakrooms, as to whether or not something really large is at play here and maybe partisan loyalties have to be re-examined?
I'm not speaking out of school to say that we know that Republican senators privately in the cloakroom, more likely these days in the gym in the morning, have
on the elevator rides and the subway rides.
And the subway rides have been expressing real concerns about the possibility of things like what happened today. And, you know, they've been concerned about the people he surrounds himself with, the president at the White House, that they see folks like the vice president and Reince Priebus as the best ways in to understand what's going on and to know that there are people around that they can trust who are with the president. And so there may be questions about whether the vice president and the chief of staff were consulted or whether the president really just went out on his own and did this. Remember, he'd been pretty quiet and off the radar for the last 2 or 3 days or so, and there were questions today about where is he, what is he doing, who's he meeting with. Some of that was the military action in Afghanistan that we've learned about, but it very well was also this, it seems now. But there have been private concerns expressed. And what's interesting is that Democrats continue to allude to Republicans being concerned about it. They say, you know, in my private conversations, they've raised concerns about this. We have a sense of who those Republicans are. They haven't said anything that would sort of publicize their concerns. Again, if we go a few days without a better explanation, I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them start speaking out a little more.